first impressions before public money and Vegas maybe wises up. So how are we taking advantage of early lines? That's what we cover in this show tonight. And then on Friday in our free newsletter, if you go to buttfumblesports.com, that will give you all the picks you need for Saturday and Sunday to cash in on all that NFL action. Appreciate all of you joining us. Make sure you're following us at ButtFumble Sports on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, and at Sports Fumble on Twitter. The first game we're going to get into of the divisional round is between the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Kansas City Chiefs. Where I see it, the Chiefs are an 8.5-point favorite. This game is going to kick off at 4:30 on NBC on Saturday. Some notes for you before we get into gambling trends. Kansas City is 2-7-1 against the spread in their last 10 games. Patrick Mahomes is 11-18 against the spread as a favorite of 7+ points over the last 3 seasons. And Doug Peterson is 6-0 against the spread as a playoff underdog in his coaching career. As for more team-specific trends, the favorite is 4-1-1 against the spread in the last 6 meetings between the two teams. The road team is 3-1-1 against the spread in the last 5 meetings between the two. The under is 4-1 in the last 5 meetings in Kansas City, while the over is 8-3 in the Jaguars' last 11 road games, and the under is 5-1 in the Chiefs' last 6 home games. Adam, it's amazing that Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson were able to survive Wild Card Weekend with that furious comeback in the second half against the LA Chargers. But meanwhile, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes were waiting at home. They're well rested. Is there any chance for the Jaguars to win, or is it just a cover the spread kind of play for you?
Yeah, it's going to be tough for them. I know Lope mentioned I had Jacksonville, and that's why you never rip up your tickets, because you just never know what can happen. I mean, I wrote that game off pretty much as a loss, but boy, they came back in the second half in that game with a fury. So this line actually opened up at 10, 51.5, and dropped quickly to 8.5. And I think, to your point, Wyatt, the trends that you spoke of early on there with Mahomes and Peterson is that Kansas City just hasn't been covering these kind of numbers this year. They've been playing a lot more games tight to the vest. These 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-point spreads that we see Kansas City have, they just haven't been covering them. They've been playing games a lot tighter. Now, Kansas City and Jacksonville did play against each other this week at Kansas City in Week 10. Kansas City won that game 27-17. Lawrence did have 259 through the air and 2 touchdowns, but he also was sacked 5 times. Etienne had a pedestrian game, but Kirk actually had a pretty decent game with 9 catches, 105 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And Mahomes was Mahomes, like he always is, 331 through the air, 4 touchdowns, and did have 1 interception. But like I mentioned, Kansas City just hasn't been blowing teams out. So I think this is a game you got to be real careful of. It opened up at 10, like I mentioned, down 8.5. And I think that's, to what you spoke about. So I'm going to sit tight on this one. I think Kansas City in the money line is probably the play here. And wait to see if Jacksonville, if there's a little bit buyback in Kansas City to get that closer to 10. And right now, like we talked about with the betting splits, Kansas City actually is just a slight favorite on the line with the spread at 58%. So it's not 60, 70, 80 like we're seeing on some of these other games. It's actually a little bit more even across the board with the public back in Kansas City minus this 8.5. The over, public is backing the over at 70%, which I'll just tell you right now, all 4 games that we're going to talk about tonight, the public is heavy on the over as well, too. So it's all about turnovers for me. In this game, obviously, I think you can wash out Trevor Lawrence's first half performance last week with 4 interceptions. I highly doubt that's going to happen against Kansas City, and I think they can move the ball enough to try to keep this game close. But Kansas City money line is a safe bet right now for me, and we'll see where the line moves later in the week. And as far as the over and under, 51.5 is a lot of points. It's interesting that it didn't move since it's opened, because 51.5 is a lot of points here too. So I'm going to sit tight on that one and just see where this line settles in towards the end of the week.
This Butt Fumble Sports Show is about just what Adam spoke to. How do we take advantage of the early lines? Vegas puts out these early lines. How do we try to take advantage of them before the public money comes down or before some of the sharp money comes down? We want to make sure that we're getting really smart advice. Appreciate Adam going through his breakdown. Now, Jay Lope, Lope, what are your thoughts on this game between the Jaguars and the Chiefs? Chiefs won this previous matchup at Arrowhead earlier this year. Should we expect more of the same this weekend?
I am a little scared about the Chiefs line. They haven't covered them, like Adam said, so I'm leaning a little bit towards Jacksonville there. But I am on the over. One thing that stands out is how good Patrick Mahomes was, and the Jags struggle a little bit against the passing game. So um, I I might follow the. If he said the public was on the over, I'm kind of getting suckered into that too. I definitely see a high scoring game between these two offenses.
Lope, I'm curious about this. Do you think that the running game of the Chiefs could have a good game? Isaiah Pacheco, Jerick McKinnon. If you're going to play DFS for this weekend, do you think either one of those running backs is worth the play?
I'm not. I'm not so sure, just because they are improving in these big games, and Andy Reid's also the kind to fall away from his run game. I think he's going to put the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands, the leading MVP candidate, and let him make decisions. If Jacksonville tends to back off or play pass heavy, they might audible, but it's probably going to be a little scary with them being unproven.
I'll just say now, Jerick McKinnon has a touchdown in 6 straight games. That's been in the passing game mostly. I feel like he's a really good play to get an anytime touchdown. So that's Jerick McKinnon, anytime touchdown. I think that's a good player prop bet, just given how the trends have gone. Also, Travis Kelce at this time of the year, you always have to consider him for an anytime touchdown. And if you feel strongly that the Chiefs are going to win this game, when you do place down anytime touchdown bets, you may also want to do the option in which you can take an anytime touchdown as well as the Chiefs on the win for the parlay to combine those two just to get your odds in a little bit of better of a place. Going back to this Chiefs Jaguars game, my immediate thoughts are Doug Peterson's stat that he is undefeated against the spread as a playoff underdog throughout his coaching career. I think that speaks volumes. We saw it last week. His temperament and his coaching style fit the playoffs very well. And I think Andy Reid going up against Doug Peterson is going to be one of the best matchups of the weekend when it comes to head coaches. I'm really excited about it. I think the Jaguars find a way to stay competitive in this game. I think we've seen they have enough weapons. It's not just Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne, whether it's Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk, Zay Jones, Marvin Jones. This is a very dynamic offense across the board. The only question for me is how are they going to block Chris Jones on the defensive line, the defensive side of the Kansas City Chiefs? Because he is a monster and he's going to put on a lot of pressure up front unless they have a really good scheme. The question is, do you want to try and tire him out early on, get him trying running up the field, do a lot of quick passes to Travis Etienne right behind that defensive tackle position? But you need to do something early in that game that kind of lessens the impact of Chris Jones. I think he's going to have a serious role in this one. And ultimately, I think the difference in this game, at least when it comes to the Chiefs' defensive side of the ball, is experience and the ability to get some pressure. I think they're going to be able to pressure Trevor Lawrence a little bit more, and that will ultimately make a difference. We saw Trevor Lawrence at his worst in the first half of the wild card round. We saw him at his best in the second round. I think you're going to see a mixture here. I do expect him to throw another interception at some point, but I also expect that he'll throw at least 2 touchdowns and have a pretty good game statistically. My biggest concerns, obviously, are how did the Jaguars stop Patrick Mahomes? You saw in the second half of that game last week that they were able to stop Justin Herbert, whether that's because they finally got pressure on him or because Joe Lombardi and Brandon Staley took the foot off the gas. I think that the Chiefs are going to be able to score a lot of points on the Jaguars. You can already hear where my mind's going based off of how I'm predicting this game. I really like points to be scored. And I know that that stat of over under in the wild card round was 5-1. There were a lot of things that went into that. Not just the talent that we're seeing across the NFL, but you're also seeing the NFL. They're going to favor the offenses on a lot of these flag calls. And I expect that you're going to see a lot of points scored. The NFL wants an entertaining product. Points allow that to happen. So I do like the over in this game. I do like Kansas City on the money line. And I do like Jacksonville to cover. So one more time, the early line Butt Fumble Sports pick of the week is Kansas City on the money line, Jacksonville to cover +10 after you buy a 1.5, as Butt Fumble Sports always does, and the over after you buy a 1.5. Now, again, If you want the Butt Fumble Sports picks right before the weekend kicks off, go to the website, buttfumblesports.com, sign up for the free newsletter. You'll get all of our picks, gambling trends, and game notes that go into that. And that way you're ready for divisional round that comes out on Friday morning. Additionally,